Okay, so thank you all for coming and for your interest in maybe not so, let's say, sexy topic as AI and other topics that are discussed today. But I think it's very important to also have some knowledge about regulations in the field of cybersecurity. So maybe let's do a quick exercise and raise your hands if you are working on a daily basis with cybersecurity in your job. Okay, it seems like half of people present here is working with cybersecurity. Good. From your experience and your company, do you think that cybersecurity is perceived positively, or on the other hand, or on the contrary, is it perceived like an extra expense that you just have to pay? What do you think? Do you think it's perceived more negatively and something that you have to do? Okay. Great. Okay, so we'll try to present a different opinion today when it comes to this discussion. So I hope you'll have a great time. We'll try to answer the questions we'll receive. But first things first, one important note. After this discussion, we'll have one more presentation. It will be focused on cybersecurity and AI. It will be a lightning talk. We only have 10 minutes to get from here to the other side of the venue. So maybe we'll not be able to respond to all of your questions, but if you're interested, you can come there with us and then we can discuss it after the presentation. Okay, so welcome. Let's start with the presentation itself. Firstly, the agenda very quickly. We'll introduce ourselves, then we'll have some short introduction about cybersecurity threats and why do we actually need cybersecurity regulations. We'll briefly discuss NIS2, we'll discuss DORA, we'll share some of our stories and let's call it pain points from our experience. And then finally, we'll provide you some key takeaways that you should walk away with in your mind.
Okay, so good morning also from me. I hope you hear me well. My name is Cybersecurity. I'm a security associate manager at Accenture. We work together here with Matěj in a security consulting team. And my area of expertise lies mainly within the security governance, risk management, compliance, strategy, and so on. But prior to joining Accenture, I also worked in a critical infrastructure sector, working as a security operations security operations center. So therefore, my interest is also in incident management and cyber defense.
Okay, and my name is Matěj Spišák. I'm working as a security delivery senior analyst at Accenture here in Bratislava. I have some experience in delivering transformative security projects for big companies, but I'm also helping our clients to be compliant with new cybersecurity regulations. So let's start with the first idea. And it says that cyber threats are evolving quickly and there are no signs of slowing down. So we know that, okay, I'm having some technical issues. Okay, if you can help me with that. Good. So we know that cyber threats are becoming more sophisticated, more effective, and cyber actors are trying to use new technologies, including AI, that we will discuss later in the lightning talk, to become more damaging. For example, we see deep fakes as part of these new types of attacks. And it's very important in a general context, because I would like to mention it as part of changes of the global security environment. So we are seeing these new sophisticated threats, new types of attacks, and new technologies being used for, let's say, boosting these attacks. But at the same time, we are seeing other changes, including digitalization, which means that companies and governments are moving more of their services online. At the same time, they are using more and more devices which are connected to the internet, which basically means that they are expanding the attack surface. And we cannot forget about the geopolitical situation, because cyberspace is becoming, let's say, a place where countries and various actors are trying to do some power struggle. They are trying to weaponize the cyber. We know a lot cybersecurity state-sponsored groups conducting various types of attacks. We also know about cyber criminal groups that are freely operating from territory of some of the countries, that are not prosecuting them, they are not arresting them, and they are letting them freely operate and attack the victims. And also we know a lot about hacktivist groups, which are highly motivated based on politics and religion, conducting, for example, DDoS attacks, denial of service. Lastly, even though I already mentioned it very briefly, cybercrime is a huge phenomenon, it's very recent. We are seeing a huge spike in ransomware attacks in the last couple of years. And we also know that the cost of cybercrime is reaching extreme numbers, like unimaginable numbers. So what I wanted to say by this is that we need these cybersecurity regulations because we need to reflect the changes in this security environment. We need companies and governments to have some clear baseline of security requirements they need to implement to protect their citizens and their customers, which is actually all of us. So let's get to NIS2. So brief background. Obviously, NIS2 is the second legislation. So there was already NIS1 or NIS Directive, Network and Information Security Directive, which was the first piece of EU-wide legislation on cybersecurity, and its aim was to achieve a high common level of cybersecurity across the EU member states. But as we've already discussed, the threat landscape has changed. We are more dependent on network and information system. There are new risks, and also when it comes to transposition of NIS1 and then its implementation, it brought to light some inherent flaws of this first piece of legislation. So for this reason, NIS2 was created to solve all these issues. And importantly, because we will discuss it later, it will be very necessary, NIS2 is a directive, which means that there must be a transposition to the national legislation. Actually, the transposition deadline is October 17, which is today, if I'm correct. Okay, good. So now when we know why we need these cybersecurity regulations, we know the background of NIS2. It's important to know what are actually the changes then that NIS2 is bringing, so the important things. It's good to know that NIS2 is increasing the scope of the directive, so new sectors will be covered or are covered with this legislation. So it is pretty easy to identify if you fall under some of these sectors. At the same time, it's good to know that these entities or sectors or services are classified based on their importance. So it can be either essential or important. We'll see on the next slide in a minute. And it is also good to know that there is a clear size threshold. So you have to be either a medium-sized business or a large enterprise to be considered. There are some exceptions we'll discuss in a minute, but this is important to know. At the same time, NIS2 is establishing some sanctions and administrative fines if you are, let's say, ignoring its implementation, and the management is liable. This is something that NIS2 is bringing. It's important to know. It's, in my opinion, a good thing for a particular reason, because if management is liable, it means it has to care. They need to go through some training, they need to understand cybersecurity to make informed decisions about security and the risks that their companies are facing. Increased cooperation, this is maybe not that important for organizations, but for state institutions and, let's say, responsible institutions. NIS2 creates a set of rules and procedures in the event of large-scale incident or crisis to better handle these incidents on an international level. It also establishes the European Cyber Crisis Liaison Organization Network, or EU Cyclone. And lastly, as part of this slide, I would like to mention strengthened security requirements. but it also depends on the state of legislation in your country. But this directive includes a list of key security requirements that need to be addressed and implemented by the regulated companies. For example, encryption, supply chain security, but incident response or incident reporting as well. And I'm mentioning this, for example, because of multi-stage approach to incident reporting, which was also introduced by NIS2. So if you and your company is experiencing a significant cybersecurity incident, you are obliged to notify your local cybersecurity authority within 24 hours after you know about the incident. Then you have 72 hours to provide more details, and then approximately 1 month to provide a final report. So this is why it's multi-stage incident reporting. So which sectors are covered now by NIS2? The most important thing, I think, from this slide is the fact that the number of entities that must comply with NIS2 increased significantly. So we see some of the sectors, I'm not going to name them here, but you can find all of them in Annex 1 and Annex 2 of NIS2 directive. So take only this slide as kind of illustratory help. But we see, for example, space and research, postal and courier services, which are being included in the scope now. Also, we've mentioned we'll have essential sectors and important sectors, which also means that there will be a chance or an option for dual speed security based on the importance of your company and the sector it belongs to. So not all the companies will have the, let's say, same security requirements they'll have to implement, but it will be based on their categorization. And I think this is very, very important slide. It's actually the last thing I'm going to say on NIS2 today. As I mentioned previously, it's a directive and national transposition has to be done to the local legislation, which means that NIS2 itself as a directive is creating some kind of end goals, some kind of end game, and it's actually the member states, they have to do the transposition, they have to get all these requirements into their national legislation. And why is it important? If you are a company owner or you're responsible for cybersecurity compliance, it is not enough to look only at NIS2 directive text. You have to be familiar with the local transposition. It's important because it might include some local specifics. At the same time, local transposition might be even a bit more strict than NIS2 because it's just a baseline. This is important, so it's important to know your local legislation. Also because of previous state of the legislation. So for example, in the Czech Republic, they decided to write completely new Cybersecurity Act. But in Slovakia, because it was better aligned also previously with the goals of NIS2, they've decided just to do an update of the legislation. And I also mentioned that the directive leaves certain discretion to member states to identify smaller entities with a high security risk profile. And I wanted to say it because I mentioned that there is a clear threshold when it comes to size. There are sectors, but at the same time, there is this option that member states can do if they consider your company to be very critical.
Okay, thank you, Maciej. And now we're moving to the second regulation that we have prepared for you, which is the DORA. So what is DORA? DORA is an abbreviation for Digital Operation Resilience Act. It's a regulation that was issued by the European Commission, and it's directly focusing on the financial sector. It's also directly legally binding. Why the financial sector? Do you have any idea why was the financial sector chosen to be strictly regulated? Okay, so actually we can mention here two reasons. The first one is that it was a part of a EU digital financial package. It was a set of regulation that was reflecting the new, let's say, new changes in the financial industry, such as digital finance, new products or crypto assets and so on. So there was also a need to somehow regulate the security while operating these kind of new products. And the second reason is pretty obvious or pretty reasonable, and it's that the finance are actually is the backbone of the whole system. So it affects all the other industries, beginning with industry, agriculture, public administration, health, transportation, etc., etc. So the aim of this regulation is to somehow harmonize the existing rules on managing ICT governance, ICT risk management, or the incident management, and to aim it to all financial institutions. The goal is actually to ensure that the market is resilient and is able to recover from any kind of disruptions like ICT incidents. Who is in scope of DORA? As the name is somehow suggestive, it's obvious that in scope there are all the banking, credit and payment institutions, but there are also investment and trading services, crypto assets, savings, crowdfundings, credit rating agencies and so on. And obviously a big part of the scope is the insurance sector. But what could be a little bit surprising is that we have a big player also in scope of DORA, which is all respective third-party ICT service providers. What that means? It means that if you're a company that is delivering any kind of ICT services or products to the financial institutions, you are also in scope of DORA. And that means that you have to be DORA compliant in full scope. So it can be, for example, the data centers. It can be any company that provides software, for example, for the insurance companies. It can be cloud computing services and many other. Regarding the content, DORA stands on 5 pillars. I will show you on this infographics. Above all these pillars, there is the governance model. This says, let's say, the baseline of the responsibilities, the rules, set of policies that should be implemented to be able to manage all the ICT risks. The first content pillar is the ICT risk management. That is describing how should the financial institution approach the process of mitigating of the risks. Second content pillar is ICT management. It obviously set up some kind of a policies for incident management process, so what to do, how to handle it. But there's also a specification of the criteria on how to classify the incidents, saying what is the major incident, the significant one or not. And also, obviously, there are mentioned the reporting mechanisms towards the authorities. Third content pillar is the operational resilience testing. This is a pretty interesting part. DORA says that the financial institutions should test their resiliency regularly and in the whole scope of the ICT services. So it's not only the security testing, like threat-led penetration testing, vulnerability management, but also the normal operational ones, such as co-testing or disaster recovery testing, or BCM. Business continuity management. And the fourth content pillar is the most challenging one, is the management of third-party risks. This pillar says that the financial institution are responsible for their vendors. This is the biggest game changer from the previous regulations, because prior to that, the institutions thought that they can say that if anything happened with their vendor, it's the fault of the vendor. DORA says, no, it's the responsibility of the financial institution to make sure their vendors are reliable, resistant, and they won't stop our business from running. So part of this column, there's also like the process how to register information about vendors, and also what has to be reflected in the contracts with the vendors. So there are contractual clauses and requirements for security assessments and so on. And beyond this, there is a pillar for monitoring and reporting, saying how should, there are actually 2 ways. The first one is how the financial institution should communicate with authorities, report on the incidents, or saying how their compliance program is going. But also, and this is also a game changer, saying that the institution should communicate together. like sharing intelligence about emerging threats to make the market a little bit vigilant and to be able to prevent any emerging threats. So as you can see also on the infographic is an interest for the whole company. CEO, the board, Chief Risk Operating Officer, the CISO, procurement, business, operations, of course, legal compliance. So it's highly relevant to the whole company. So Matěj was describing NIS2. I tried to shortly introduce DORA. But what is the relationship between them? NIS2 is European directive that has to be transformed and transposed locally. And the area of the scope of NIS2 is really wide and it covers many industries. DORA, on the other hand, is directly legally binding and is focusing only on the financial sector. But it doesn't mean that the financial institution can ignore NIS2. Actually, in a lot of cases, the banking or the insurance companies or any other are also in scope of NIS2 and need to apply both. The suggested approach here is to firstly address DORA, since it's much deeper and much more detailed, and then perform some kind of a gap analysis if we have any gaps also in the NIS2, because it's always depending on the countries. The countries can always add some additional clauses that they feel are relevant or important and can add them above the NIS2 level. So to be a little bit more specific, we can show you how it's the situation in the Czech Republic, since this is our practice. So DORA, as I mentioned, is European regulation, sector-specific, directly legally binding, has main 5 essential domains. NIS2 is the European directive, which is transposed in Czech Republic in the new version of Cybersecurity Act, and also their provision and the specific security requirements are in the decrees for the essential and for the important domain, as was Matěj describing. There are 2 authorities then that can audit and assess the fulfillment of the regulation. NÚKIB, National Bureau for Cyber and Information Security, and Česká národní banka, Czech National Bank. Both of those authorities can audit the subject of the law and are entitled to fine them, give them penalties, and so on. So, because the scope is much bigger than it was in the past, these 2 authorities has to join forces and divide. So for the financial sector, the primary binding regulation is DORA and is primarily audited by Česká národní banka, and the NIS2 is in the competence of NÚKIB. But that doesn't mean that NÚKIB cannot come to financial institutions. It's very, very common, and NÚKIB is also helping the institutions to mitigate, for example, incident and help reach the compliance. Regarding the timeline, the deadline is soon. So DORA was published 2 years ago and applies from the year 2023, but enters into force in January 2025, so in 2 months, and is very similar with NIS2, respectively with the Cybersecurity Act in Czech Republic. It was supposed to be published and enforced today, but we had a little bit of a delay in Czech Republic, so the enforcement was postponed to January as well.
Okay, now we'll share some stories and let's call it pain points that we've identified during ensuring compliance and helping our clients to be prepared for these new regulations. So we have some experience with big financial groups, and the main message I would like to mention now is that it's really not easy. Cybersecurity is very difficult. Even if you are a big company, you have a lot of resources when it comes to money, when it comes to talent. At the same time, it can still get very difficult for you. First of all, it's because of the structure. Structure is often oriented around one central authority, which is preparing, for example, these policies which ensure the compliance with the regulation. But at the same time, then these policies are being sent to all the legal entities that are owned by the central group. And it takes some time. It then takes some time to do some localization of these documents. It takes some time to do adoption, implementation of these documents. And you can imagine that it's really difficult. I saw the question on intersection of NIS2 and DORA. So it was already mentioned how these two regulations interact. So if you are a financial institution, DORA is legally binding for you. It's, if I'm correct, lex specialis for the particular field or industry. But at the same time, there is NIS2, and you also have to take it into consideration. You need to study local adoption of the regulation to see if there is something where maybe it creates some new, let's say, requirements for new processes that you still need to adopt and behave according to them. So just the last message, if you are owner of a smaller company, don't be scared, because it is difficult for all of us, so not only for you.
Okay, so one of the challenges that we have encountered in our practice is the situation when the client or the company is making a compliance program, but at the same time undergoing some kind of organizational change, such as transformation or anything like that. So during one of our NIS2 compliance program, we had a client which was operating worldwide and had a lot of entities and a lot of business here in the European Union. But at the same time, this was the first time for this client to encounter such a big security regulation. But the problem was that because of the transformation and the organizational change, there was a really uncertainty and unclarity and lack of visibility above the stakeholders. So we were really spending a lot of time running around the company, trying to figure out who is our guy to contact. Because compliance program is a big challenge for a lot of work, a lot of policy update, governance, and then the actual implementation. And it's a lot of work. And that can easily happen that the departments argue between each other, saying, it's not my responsibility, this is your business, and I will only assist you, but I'm not taking the ownership. And then you finally have the program and realize that you completely not forgot, but you didn't know that there's actually one area that was completely forgotten because we didn't have the stakeholder, and we didn't even know that the company exists. So the transparency above what is in our scope is the crucial point to focus on. The challenge can be also caused by the authorities themselves. I already suggested it in my previous slide. There can be significant delays caused by the authorities in publishing their regulation that directly imply the companies that need to be regulated. For example, as mentioned with the local transposition of NIS2, it's a political topic. It needs to be accepted by the government. And when it's not going smoothly, it can cause significant delays. And then it limits the time for the companies to start their compliance program and to get ready. And the same happened with DORA. DORA was actually published 2 years ago, which is quite a lot of time to get familiar with it, get to know the content. But DORA also consists from so-called RTS, Regulatory Technical Standards. This is hundreds and hundreds of requirements, and the last set was published in June, and it's still a little bit in the draft version, so it leaves only 6 months for the companies to be compliant. Moving to the topic challenges or the content challenges. From my perspective, from my practice, what I see as the most painful point is the supply chain. I have it in red colors implying DORA, but it's also relevant for NIS2 as well. So DORA requires really a robust mechanisms for vendor management. DORA basically says that you have to know every one of your suppliers. You need to have every detailed information about them. You need to assess the criticality. You need to know what their suppliers are. You have to put in the contracts what are the security requirements. You need to conduct the security assessments. You need to monitor if they are compliant, and so on and so on and so on. So you can imagine how much of an administration is behind it. It takes a lot of effort regarding budgeting, regarding people, regarding time, and so on. And there are also two other challenges. The first one is the scope, the distance of the scope, because DORA is also covering so-called subcontracting. DORA says that you have to have the visibility of who is your supplier, supplied by. But where does this end? Do you have to know every single supplier, and the chain can go on and on and on and on, and where does it stop? The second thing is, of course, the vendor dependencies, because DORA wants the companies to be resilient, and that means also a little bit independent. So in case of your vendor run out of the business, you have to be redundant, you have to have some kind of a replacement. But if it's a technology that is the only one on the market, what do you do? What is your way out from this? So this is another challenge. Last but not least, is my favorite, is the resilience testing and continuity. It's not an issue regarding the topic, but regarding the effort, because DORA wants really, it has high demands on the regular resilience testing to the whole scope of the ICT services. As I mentioned, it's the threat-led penetration testing, DR testing, code testing, and so on. And it has to be performed regularly, but not only for the critical assets. DORA says that also other important or supportive assets has to be tested, which is really, really wide scope that takes a lot of effort to conduct. One more fun fact here is that DORA also requires high proficiency. For example, saying that the testers should be certified, which is another really high specification. So I'm not saying it's all about the money, but definitely money is the thing. Let's say better to say budget or effort or in terms of sources, time, and so on.
Yes, let's devote 2 minutes to key takeaways and how to be prepared, and then we can jump into the questions. So just very briefly, key takeaways that you should take from this presentation. New industries and services are being covered by regulations, NIS2 in this case. If you are a business owner or you are responsible for compliance, check if you are in scope, check your size, know your environment, do some gap analysis, do some risk analysis, and if you see you have to implement something, then it would be really good if you do it. That's the first thing. Secondly, very important message, take regulation as an enabler. So the security environment is changing. We need to reflect it also in our businesses, and cybersecurity is here to protect and support your business. So it's not an additional expense you have to pay that brings you nothing, but it enables the functioning of your business, and it should be considered in this way.
So the key takeaway that we also want you to take from this presentation is that the regulations are not here to make money. It's not here to persecute you or to get the fines. It really is here to make the market, the institution resilient, not only from cyber threats, but from any ICT-related incident, because it doesn't have to be the case that you're a victim of an attack. It can be malfunction, and it can happen to anybody, as we witnessed many times in the past months. So really, regulations are here to help us strengthen the capacities to protect, detect, and recover. And the last one is the call for responsibility. Those regulations say that the board is directly responsible for managing ICT risks. So it's in the best interest of the company to really be responsible, to be proactive, to share the knowledge, and to be prepared for any kind of emerging threats. So that's it. We have only a few minutes.
Yes, we have, let's say, 5 minutes. So jump into the questions. The first one with 2 likes. I have a tech cybersec background. If I wanted to become an auditor consultant of this legislation, do I need law governance education as well? So definitely not. Neither of us have, let's say, law background. I think that most of cybersecurity consultants and auditors, they have technical background, so IT, but at the same time, if you want to become an auditor, I think this is somehow regulated. So in Slovakia, I know there is a decree about auditing, or annex, I don't know the precise translation, I think it's decree that specifies who can do the audit. So you have to be certified to be allowed to do these audits properly. So don't worry if you study something related to more technical aspects of security, you can still very easily get into auditing as well.
Okay, I have another question here. How do NIS and DORA legislation interact in case of entities in scope of both of them? For example, banks incident reporting. So we touched it a little bit. The primary contact for a banking institution is DORA, but it's also the NIS2. So for example, Czech banks have to report major incident, both to Czech National Bank, but also to NUKIP. I hope I've answered this question.
I'm sorry. Then I saw a question, if your company has contracts with other IT companies, so what does it mean? So from our experience, what our clients did, they had to change the contracts. So they created some kind of, let's say, general template, which included maybe some requirements that are part of DORA or NIS2 to govern their suppliers. So they created a new template, and then the template was distributed to all the procurement departments, legal departments, and they used this template to either be compliant with these regulations, but also to protect themselves when it comes to, say, supply chain.
I will only add just a brief note here that the big companies such as Microsoft, Google, but also Accenture, they were pretty aware of DORA applying to them, so they already prepared some kind of adjustments on their contracts and started this process really months ago, so they didn't wait for the financial institution to approach them. So it's like a, let's say, central initiative. And let's do the last question. If the third-party provider of IT is using other IT providers, are those sub-providers also in scope of DORA? Yes. I think we mentioned it in the last slide. Yes, the subcontractors are in scope of DORA when it's connected with the ICT service provided to the financial institution. So for example, if there's like a big technology, including hardware and software, for example, for the financial institution, and this company has another provider which is giving only the, let's say, the physical parts, this is also in scope of DORA. So it's not the paper providers, but if it's connected with the ICT for a financial institution, then yes.
So I think that's it from our side. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for the questions. If you want to hear our second presentation about the impact of AI on cybersecurity when it comes to both offensive and defensive, you have precisely 12 minutes to move to the other side of the venue, and we'll be happy to have a quick chat with you even after our presentation there. So thanks a lot, and I hope it gave you something.
Thank you very much.